Mental health professionals often encounter difficult cases, but some conditions stand out as particularly devastating. One involved a 20-year-old man with severe OCD, tormented by constant mental loops. No treatment helped, and he repeatedly asked if things would be okay, but couldn't accept any response. If anyone gave an uncertain answer, he would panic, repeat the question louder, and the cycle would begin again. His family was deeply affected, especially when he developed intrusive thoughts involving his younger sister. Filled with guilt and self-hatred, he attempted suicide multiple times, once before hospitalization and twice after brief discharges. Sadly, he ended his life on his fourth attempt, leaving his family torn between sorrow, guilt, and a difficult sense of peace. Another psychologist mentioned that anorexia nervosa is among the most alarming disorders, being the deadliest of all. Many people struggle with eating disorders, but the purely restrictive type can resemble psychosis. Sufferers may not recognize their condition or see their true physical state. Despite extreme undernourishment and overexercising, some survive shockingly long until their bodies ultimately fail. They may desperately want to live, but feel utterly unable to eat. An eating disorder specialist added that when the brain lacks nutrients, it can lead to dangerous mental patterns. It's often difficult just to help someone realize they're in trouble, let alone encourage them to recover. A former jail clinician described assessing a young man charged with attacking his doom mother under the influence of command hallucinations. At first, the man seemed stable and hopeful, but during a follow-up, his behavior suddenly shifted. Surveillance footage later showed the clinician stepping back instinctively before the man lunged at them. He was restrained by an officer, but the intensity in his eyes was unforgettable. Dissociative identity disorder and psychosis often overlap, making diagnosis complex. Another person reflected on working in a mental health facility and being most disturbed by a patient with Munchausen syndrome. Constant need for attention and sympathy was overwhelming, and she appeared to believe her own falsehoods to a delusional degree. One woman inflicted repeated infections on herself until her legs had to be amputated, truly believing she was ill. Known today as factitious disorder, the name may have changed, but the challenges remain. Lastly, a former CPS worker shared a heartbreaking case involving a guardian who adopted multiple children and abused them, resulting in the children harming one another. The trauma from that case caused nearly every professional involved to leave the field permanently. After witnessing deeply traumatic events in the mental health field, many professionals have walked away for their own well-being. One former worker, now a baker, recalled being a bailiff during the sentencing of a man who exploited foster children for harmful material. Though the evidence wasn't shown, the descriptions alone left a lasting impact. He was the only person the worker could find no sympathy for, and even found himself shocked by the thoughts the case stirred. Another contributor described a child, arsonist, just 9 or 10, who had set multiple buildings on fire, including the family home and even a crib with his baby sister inside. She survived, but was left permanently scarred. A former intern at a psychiatric hospital in Texas shared how a young boy, also an arsonist, would quietly whisper disturbing things, like how someone might smell good on fire, despite seeming otherwise sweet. Another challenging case involved a person with severe autism, psychosis, and learning disabilities, nonverbal, unpredictable, and capable of violent outbursts. He lives in a specially secured apartment with coded locks and panic alarms for staff, but his aggression remains a serious concern. In another extreme situation, a young man with treatment-resistant schizophrenia followed a command hallucination and harmed himself severely. Similar incidents have occurred elsewhere, raising concern over how often such extreme cases happen. One especially heart-wrenching case involved a 7-year-old boy who was severely abused by his parents and left unconscious at a hospital. Covered in bruises and trauma, he initially only screamed when spoken to. Gradually, he opened up to a caregiver who visited him daily before he was moved to a group home. The experience left a lasting emotional scar on the staff involved, who still think about him years later. On the topic of auditory hallucinations, some voices can blend into the background like distant thoughts, but in rare and severe cases, they override all reasoning. One individual heard these intrusive voices at such a deep level that they acted on dangerous commands without any conscious control, unable even to alert anyone before it happened. It's a reminder of the complexity and severity of mental illness, and how deeply it can affect both the patient and those trying to help. While not always working directly in mental health roles, many individuals have witnessed its harsh realities up close. One shelter worker recalled a man with schizophrenia whose medication was mismanaged by his care providers, leading to a severe decline. After stealing a kitchen knife, he attempted to harm himself, reportedly doing so to protect others around him from the voices he heard. Another volunteer at a psychiatric facility remembered a woman with extreme mood shifts and a vacant gaze, who, after a successful medication adjustment, appeared lucid and self-aware, expressing gratitude and apologies in ways previously unimaginable. In a long-term care home, a 34-year-old woman suffering from Korsakoff syndrome, a preventable dementia caused by alcoholism, was among elderly residents, a tragic reminder of how early addiction can lead to irreversible damage. Adolescent psychiatric wards also reveal sobering truths, with children as young as 10 battling eating disorders and trauma-related conditions. One child, unable to eat or speak due to severe abuse, required a feeding tube, while another lived with command hallucinations telling them to harm loved ones. Mental illness in children brings a unique heartbreak, marked by innocence lost too early. In cases of dissociative identity disorder, DID, trauma runs deep. One patient, rescued by the FBI as a child from prolonged abuse, later became a mother of 5, but her unresolved trauma and substance dependency led to her early death and her children entering foster care. Despite her efforts, the impact of her past remained. Another individual shared how their spouse with DID was unable to sleep for days due to a terrified alter, requiring emergency intervention just to find rest. These stories show the devastating and complex nature of mental illness, impacting not only the individuals, but everyone around them, and the immense compassion required to walk alongside those who suffer. Working in environments with individuals who have severe cognitive and behavioral challenges can be deeply impactful. One teacher at a school for students with profound disabilities described a particularly strong and largely non-verbal boy with autism who would sometimes become violently aggressive, seemingly aware of his own outbursts, once handing her a safety mat moments before an episode began. During these episodes, he would lose control, attacking others until collapsing in tears, his gentle demeanor returning. Suspected undiagnosed conditions and a family history of schizophrenia added complexity to his struggles. Others, in similar caregiving roles, echoed how traumatic brain injuries, TBIs, often present unpredictably. Individuals sitting calmly one moment and violently lashing out the next. One child's father, once a bodybuilder, suffered a TBI from a motorcycle crash and became so dangerously volatile he had to be caged and restrained during psychiatric care. Another caregiver recounted a client who declined rapidly from functioning normally to being nearly nonverbal, sleepless, and delusional. Eventually diagnosed with catatonia, he was close to death before treatment began. Among the most jarring conditions described was postpartum psychosis, how a healthy, functioning adult can spiral into confusion and hallucinations shortly after childbirth. One woman believed she saw 3 identical babies and couldn't tell which was hers, a tragic yet treatable consequence of perinatal mental illness. These stories reveal the often overwhelming weight carried by caregivers and families who witness the fragility of the human mind and the depths of suffering that can emerge from unseen injuries and disorders. Mental illness is often portrayed as frightening, but what's most devastating is the deep suffering it inflicts, not just on the person affected, but also on those around them. A mother haunted by postpartum psychosis once described seeing a disembodied head of pure evil trying to steal her baby through the window, night after sleepless night. Another caregiver remembered a man with schizophrenia who became terrifyingly violent during psychotic episodes, only to return with proper medication to a joyful, kind member of society. Yet the most haunting cases often involve children. One 5-year-old, gripped by disturbing brain thoughts, held a paraprofessional hostage with a knife. His pain wasn't the result of external abuse. It was his own mind betraying him, and his mother spent sleepless nights terrified in her own home, unsupported by a system that dismissed the threat because he was just a child. True antisocial. Personality disorder also leaves a chilling mark. One woman recalled growing up with a father who had no conscience, who used manipulation and cruelty with the ease of flipping a switch. He once starved his daughters during visitation and fed them rotten meat just to trigger their mother's phobia. His smile was just a mask. When people joke about sociopathy, they don't understand the horror of meeting someone who lacks all. Empathy, whose presence feels like wearing a human skin without a soul inside. These stories remind us that behind every diagnosis is a human being, often suffering deeply and often without the support they so urgently need.